community that's committed to three primary focus. The first is authentic living, that you can live your authentic life and do it without judgment, without fakenization, with full acceptance in the space. And that acceptance starts with yourself. So living that authentic life. We are also stabilized in our purpose for social justice activism. We believe we are a prophetic voice of protest, and we engage in those dynamics. And that's why we even have our social justice minute as part of our gathering experience. Yes, it's spiritual to change the dynamics so that people's lives can be full and they can have equity in the world that we live in. So we participate in that. And of course, community service, because we are a serving spiritual community. We serve those that are in need, the homeless, those who are in distress. We look for opportunity to serve as a standalone community, but also in partnering with organizations. And so that's the core of who we are. And I'm so blessed by the amazing partners, members of this real life spiritual community. So welcome once again. And especially if you are a first-time guest or you're viewing us on Facebook, welcome to the Gathering Experience. It is an experience because we believe that through this time, that you present yourself in this moment, that you present yourself, that you get to experience something, not just hear something, but experience something as being both someone who gives and someone who receives. You experience that in the space. So be blessed today. Continue to be in the flow and to be present. You showed up here today, so be present for why your life has brought you to this moment. So now I want to move into our life study for today, which is entitled, I Still Believe. And yes, Reverend Rochelle, I actually do have a subtitle today, which is Lean In. I Still Believe, subtitle, Lean In. Now last week, if you joined us, and even if you did not have an opportunity, I want to kind of refresh your mind a little bit or share with you some new ideas if you weren't able to join us on what I talked about. The life study was the power of community. And we talked about this concept of the triune being within the biblical text and within Christian theology. It speaks of a God that is one, but functions in three distinct capacities. And yet those three functioning capacities come together, the triune come together to bring about its intended purpose. So even though there is three functions, right? Father, Son, Spirit, it's one. And they coalesce, if you would, they come together to bring about intended purpose. So we talked about Father as mind, right? As intention. We talked about Spirit as inspiration. And also we looked at body as what we call activation. So for us as a human being, mind, spirit, body, we realize that we have to set our intention. So we have that mind focus, that intention with our lives. And then that inspiration from Spirit that leads, that guides our, that fuels our passion, that invigorates us, right? It's that breath of life that is within us, that Spirit, that inspiration. And finally, of course, the body, the vessel through which that is activated. So you live it out in the body. So we talked about the power of community, of coming unified, that these three parts come together as a whole. And so as a human being, right? You bring the power of a unified whole, mind, spirit, body to your situation. You bring mind, spirit, body. You bring intention, inspiration, and activation to whatever you engage. That's what we shared about last week, because life is asking a question of us. Life is asking, how are you going to come at me? So how are you coming at life? Are you bringing your whole self to whatever it is that you face, whatever it is that you take on? So you've got to come unified, right? That's the power of unity, of coming unified, of your unified self, mind, spirit, body. You've got to come unified to get to the place you were built to occupy. We talked about that the power of community, coming unified, right, means being in tune. So I keep, when you're in tune, right, when you come unified, it keeps your life from becoming incongruent, in conflict with its true and highest self. The power of community, of coming unified makes you come into harmony with the highest capacities of your being. I really hope you enjoyed last week, because I'm building on what we shared about last week. The last thing I want to highlight from that teaching of the power of community from last Sunday is your work, and I call it a work of love, because that's what it is. Your work of love is to stay vigilant and vigorous in the monitoring, right, and maturing of this unified being. Because I get it. It's not an automatic thing. There are times when your mind is in one place, but your feelings, your spirit, and your body is in another. There are times when you're feeling something or you get inspired by something and your mind isn't there yet. But your work of love, right, is to bring those three parts of you, those three functioning components of yourself, to a unified whole. And that requires that you be vigilant, right? You are alert, and you be vigorous. You've got to be forceful in this, in the monitoring and maintaining of your unified being. So your work is to stay vigilant and vigorous, which takes me to our sharing today on I Still Believe, subtitle, Lean In. Your work of love is to still be vigilant, gotta be alert, gotta be awake, and vigorous, forceful. Dr. Hobson, who actually will be speaking for us during our anniversary month, who is my mentor and one of my professors when I was at Howard working on my Master of Divinity degree, he would use a word often, and that word has stuck with me. I use it often myself, and that is radical. Because you gotta be radical about your life. I actually find that to be a compliment. When Donald Trump talks about the radical left or the radical this group or I find that to be a compliment. You gotta be radical. You gotta be vigorous. You gotta be forceful about your life, because your life is necessitated in this earth. So your work of love is to stay vigilant and vigorous. This is not a time to leave your truth. I get it. We're in a season like none other that perhaps we've never seen in our generation. We're in a season where life is asking such poignant questions about us, of us, and we have to answer. And many times when we come into particular seasons or moments or junctions in our lives, our what we say we believe, the truth that we say we believe gets tested. It gets questioned. And unfortunately, sometimes people will abandon their truth. But there are people, this is not the time to leave your truth. Rather, this is a time to lean into it. If there's ever a time that you need to lean into your truth, it's now. In fact, I want you to just say that to yourself. I lean into my truth. Don't leave your truth during this season. Lean into it. And you do that by embracing what I call the I still believe principle. I still believe. Now, believe by definition, right, speaks to having a firm conviction, but not just a conviction, but a conviction as to the goodness, efficacy, or ability of something. I still believe. So I still believe in my truth. I still believe in its goodness. I still believe in the power of that truth to produce an effect. And I still believe in the ability of that truth. I still believe. But there's another definition of belief that I also love, and I want to bring it into the space. It says it's the issuance of credit upon the grounds of authority or testimony without complete demonstration we accept as true. Now let me do that again. Let me give you that again. It's the issuance of credit upon the grounds of authority or testimony without complete demonstration. And therefore it's accepted as true. So I want you to think about that. It's the issuance of credit. So when upon the grounds of authority or testimony without complete demonstration, which leads us then to accept it as truth. So when you think about this definition, you realize who is the one issuing credit? Who is the one issuing the credit? It's you. When you say, I still believe in my truth, you are literally issuing credit to that truth on grounds of authority. Why? Because you have that authority. That authority is within you. It's been given to you. And there's no need for a complete demonstration. I'm going to ask you to please, those of you, make sure your phones are muted or your video is muted during the live study. So please just take a look and make sure that that's the case. So you don't need complete demonstration to accept it as true. You have issued credit against that. Look at the power that we hold. So when you say, I still believe, you have given credibility to that truth based on your authority. Can I say that again? You have given credibility to that truth based on your authority, the authority that is innate within you. You don't need complete demonstration. You don't need to see it. You don't need the manifestation to understand its credibility. You literally cast or invest credibility into that truth based on your authority. I want you to take that in, because when you stand up and you say, yeah, I believe this is true about me, this is true about my life, this is what I'm looking to bring about in my life, how can you speak? How can you speak with that? Because I'm speaking in the authority that I am. And so that truth then becomes credible. It's given, it's vested with credibility. That is your power. So we're not just talking pie in the sky. We're talking very forcefully, very radically, and we're living in a state of alertness about our being. So I want you to understand this. When you say you believe, it's not just a wishy-washy, oh, I believe this. No, you literally have issued credibility to that idea that you have about yourself, to that thought that you have about yourself, to where you see yourself going, doing, being. It is upon that authority that you stand and issue credibility to that idea of yourself. So put your hand on yourself and say, I'm credible. Come on now. My truth is credible. My truth is vested with credibility. When I say I still believe, I do it with all the authority that is within me, and I vest that idea, that thing, that concept of myself with power. And that is why I can accept it as truth. I don't have to wait for it to be manifested. I don't have to see the results of it. I can absolutely accept it as truth because I've vested it. I've vested it. So how powerful then is that for you, that belief for you? Well, it all depends on how much power you vested, how credible you've determined it is. You've got the authority to do that. I still believe. So that's believing, right? When we talk about believe, that conviction, that credibility that you have based on your authority, and you don't need complete demonstration to accept it as truth. Now, I'm using a word between the I and the believe called still. I still believe. So I still have given credibility to that thing, to that idea, to that purpose. I still accept it as truth. I still believe. I still believe. Why didn't I just say I believe? Because I want to deal with the mucky in the middle. I want to deal with that because when I talk about those times, and we're in one of those times, and maybe you've been in one of those times before COVID came along, maybe there was another pandemic that you were dealing with in your own life, separate from COVID-19. And so there is something between the I and the believe, and it's that still, because you're going to be, your belief is going to be questioned. How credible is it? How much do you really believe in it? And so that's why I chose this word still. And I want to use the adverb meaning of the word still. So first, it means despite. Despite that. I believe despite that. I believe even in the midst of this. I believe. How powerful is that? Even when it appears hopeless, I believe. Or when it appears insurmountable, I still believe. Or that proverbial, the cards are stacked against me. Despite that, though it may appear that way, I still believe. I am a single mother and I still have a successful career. Do y'all feeling me? Institutionalized and systematic racism rages, and still my personhood is not diminished. I only started with the GED, and still I got my PhD. Now, when I'm using the word I, I'm not personally talking about me. I'm talking about the collective I, or for you, the individual I. I may be in a hole, HOLE, and yet I'm still whole, WHOLE. So even in the midst of COVID-19, the isolation, the uncertainty, the weariness, the loss, the daily breath of life still recalibrates my mind and inspires my body to make my daily contribution to life. I still believe. You see, because when you cease to make a contribution, you begin to die. And when you face these situations, that's what it wants to do. It wants to cut you off from what you believe. It wants to cut you off from the truth that you know about yourself. It wants to lessen the credibility of who you say you are. And that's why you got to have a still in you. Come on, church. That's why you got to have a still in you. Despite that, listen, there are many opportunities that I had throughout my life, and I know you've had it too, where I had to have a still in me, because left up to my own devices, I would have thrown in the towel a long time ago. But that inspiration, that spirit, that passion just would not let me go. It would not let me throw in the towel on my life. Yes, when you begin to question your truth, when you begin to question that dream that you're holding, when you begin to question the very vision that you've been building towards because you're in a moment, because you're at a junction, you got to have that still in you. You got to have, despite this, I still believe. So you have to see still as a despite, even in the midst of, but you also have to see still as a continuance. Yeah, this is still going on. Oh my goodness. Yes, the day may be dark, but guess what? I'm still building. I'm still in it. I'm still hungry. Are you still hungry? Are you still hungry for who you say you are? For how you want to show up in the world? I know there have been some voices and some competition that may be challenging your mind and causing you to question the credibility of your truth. But I got to ask you, if you've still got a, do you still got a still in you that makes you continue? This is your continuance. Yes, I'm still digging. See, I see it before it becomes obvious. This is not just a biblical idea as we talk about faith. This is the harmonizing of body, mind, and spirit together to bring to bear upon any moment that you face this idea that you are going to continue. Is there a still in you? So yes, despite that, yep, I still believe. Ooh, I still believe, and that's why I continue. I continue to work on writing that book. I continue to work on that business plan. I continue to work at getting out of debt because I see myself debt free. I know perhaps COVID caused a loss of job, but guess what? I realized that I stay in the flow of abundance. And so I am expecting other doors to open. I'm expecting, because my belief is so vested with power and credibility, right? Listen, folks, I'm so excited about this, because this is where we need to dig deep. This is where we need to dig deep within ourselves and remind ourselves of ourselves. And so, yes, we continue. So when I use the word still, there's a despite of, even in the midst of, and it's a continuance and energy that I continue digging, I continue writing, I continue building, I continue pressing forward. I see it before it becomes obvious. And this is what, for me, And I love using biblical motifs of scripture to identify with, because the Bible is really filled with, human nature, experiences of humanity. And one of the stories that I really love is the story of Ruth. It makes this biblical character, Ruth, such a relevant witness for us today. When we think about Ruth as a foreigner, right? She was considered the other. She was considered an outsider. She came from the wrong side of the tracks because she wasn't a Jew. She was a woman, my God. She experienced a foreign woman. Oh, wow. An other woman. She experienced death and she experienced great loss. And yet, in the midst of this, Ruth still believed in the necessity of her life and having impact, even without the demonstration, even without her having a quote unquote plan. She had that inspiration and that intention of mind, and her body was activated to follow. You still believe. Do you still believe? You still believe. You know why? You got to still believe, because you are worth it. That's what that is the primary idea behind Ruth. Even though she had all these other titles attached to her, foreigner, other, outsider, woman. People may even have looked upon her as being cursed because of her losing her husband and being barren, childless. And yet she still believed, because she believed she was worth it. And I want to tell you, you are worth it. Whatever you are believing, you are worth that. Whatever you are speaking about yourself and seeing for yourself, you are worth it. Whatever that vision is that you have for yourself, about yourself, you are worth it. It's not too late. There are people who've written some of the greatest books after they were 70 years old. People who've invented and made some of the greatest inventions after they were 80 years old. It's never too late for you. You are worth it. And if you've still vested an idea with the credibility of your authority, guess what? You are worth it. You are worth it. And your sense of worth becomes a driving force and a determining factor in what I mentioned earlier, that work of love, right? The work of love to remain vigorous and vigilant. That become vigilant, that becomes a driving force for you. You are worth it. So don't live for other people. Live your worth. Don't live your conditions. Live your worth. I still believe because I'm worth it. That's why I'm here in human form, to express the divinity of God that's within me, and it's worth it. There's no other expression like me. There's no other form or idea of God, of the God self outside of me. And I'm worth it. And it's worth being expressed. And it's worth showing up. So don't live your conditions. Live your truth, because you're worth it. Don't live your pain. Live your worth. You are a piece of divinity. You are a great spirit. And yes, like all great spirits, as Albert Einstein once wrote, as all great spirits, you're going to encounter violent opposition from mediocre minds. You're going to encounter opposition from life's circumstances, trying to convince you of something else about yourself. But you got to remember, I'm a piece of divinity in human form. And this earth requires, mandates that I show up. I'm worth it. I'm worth it. The last idea I want to give you about this word still is the idea of even greater. That's another adverb of still. Even greater, to an even greater degree, or an even greater amount. Oh my goodness. The resultant passivity, complacency, and aimlessness of ceasing to believe. How detrimental. Because from the moment you begin to relinquish that truth about yourself, you begin to move more into spaces of passivity and complacency and a directionless energy. And that's why it's so important that you be vigorous and vigilant when it comes to the truth about your life. Because there are seasons, there are moments, there are junctions in which we are pressed and expected to stop believing and therefore to give less, to accept less, and to be less. But, yes, there is a but. Because as a vigorous, forceful, and vigilant owner of selfhood, spiritually mature, breathing vessel, this moment, this season, this junction, guess what? It's having the opposite effect because I still believe. And I'm going to give to an even greater degree. Are you all hearing me? I'm going to give at an even greater degree. Yes, I still believe. And what should have caused me to retreat, what should have caused me to back up, what should have caused me to lessen the grip on the truth of my being, yes, it has had the opposite effect. I'm giving to a greater degree. I'm digging even deeper than I did before. Oh my God. I'm moving in spaces that I didn't even know that I had the capacity to move in. Yes, I still believe. Even greater. That's what that word still, even greater than before, even to a greater degree. So instead of what should have happened, right? Because of me embracing my whole, my community, because I've come unified to this season, to this moment, to this experience, to this junction, I'm having the opposite result. Oh my goodness. I still believe. And I'm going to give to an even greater degree. I still believe. So there's a greater repudiation of accepting less, of being less than what I'm worth, than the truth of my being. Oh, yes. I'm going deeper, y'all. I'm going deeper. We're going deeper. You're going deeper. Yes, I still believe. And what that tells me is that there is more to you than meets the eye. In fact, I want you to say that to yourself. I want you to put your hand anywhere on yourself, or your heart, your mind, embrace yourself. Yes, there is more to me than meets the eye. Let's say that again to yourself. There is more to me than meets the eye. There is greater power, greater capacity, greater fortitude, greater resilience, greater stick-to-itness. Yes, there is more to me than meets the eye. I still believe. I don't leave my truth in these moments. I lean into it. I reaffirm it. I allow that truth to assist me in going deeper, in building more capacity, in going to another degree of operation in my life. Our biblical witness Ruth believed. Rosa Parks, our great ancestor, believed. The marvelous John Lewis believed. Black Lives Matter activists still believe. When they were being called a domestic terrorist organization, they kept at it. They dug deeper. They expanded. They went to another degree. They stayed open. And life created opportunity. Listen, people, life created opportunity. And sometimes that's how you got to look at the pain, because the pain would want you to relinquish your truth. But instead, it allows you to go to another degree, a higher degree of living, to increase your capacity. So don't live your pain, live your truth. And that's what life is coming at us. In this moment and in other moments, and you can look back in the recesses of your imagination, of your mind, and you can remember those moments. Yes, and yet you are here. And that tells you something about your capacity. It tells you something about your ability to still believe in spite of, despite that. Yes, I continue. And I invest even greater credibility, even more. I enlarge my capacity even more. I still believe. Just say that to yourself. I still believe. I still believe. Because when you believe, that belief will create the fact. You don't have to wait for complete demonstrated reality. You have to accept it, and that belief will create the fact. It will create the manifestation. So I want to encourage you. I want to continue to remind you. I know you've been getting a lot of reminders because it's crucial. It's critical. Repetition creates persuasion. See, that's what makes a person like Donald Trump effective. It's his repetition. Even if it's nonsense, even if it's not true, repetition creates persuasion. And there's so many things that are being repeated and repeated and repeated without you even consciously being aware of it, that's coming at you. So you got to repeat the truth about you so that you can persuade yourself about yourself. I still believe. And guess what? I still believe in you. So let's continue to move forward in our great divinity. Let's continue to harmonize with the truth of our being and to leave the world the gift of our presence. God bless you so much. I've so enjoyed sharing with you today on I Still Believe. This session was recorded, so we'll make sure that the link goes out so you can listen and remind yourself during the week, because it's crucial. Repetition creates persuasion. You've got to continue to affirm the truth. You got to continue to affirm the truth about yourself, because the world needs us. The world needs you. God bless you so much. Reverend Rochelle, I'm going to turn it over to you to